Turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 10. What you think about this, Roland? How many of you have been a Christian for more than 3 years? More than 5 years? More than 10 years? More than 25 years? And I'm going to stop there, okay? How many of you remember your first week as a Christian? How many of you remember it, but understand and recognize that it may be somewhat lost in nostalgia? Anybody? When I say lost in nostalgia, as time goes on, thoughts, like experiences, change. When I was a senior in high school, I had an English teacher. His name was Paul Mathis. He's passed away now. Paul made everybody at the school believe that he was an absolute neo-pagan atheist.
I really did.
Okay.
I believed him.
He was the biggest neo-pagan atheist, not ever that I met, but he was in the top 10. And I love the man. He's a great man. And one of our English assignments was to write a letter to our future self. And he said, I'm not going to look at it. What you're going to do, he says, this part of the exercise, in order to pass the exercise, you have to write a letter, you have to bring in an envelope with your address, a stamp, and the words, please forward. So I did it. What's the big deal? I got an A in that assignment. Pretty easy. But I was one of that challenging guys who said, you know what? I'm going to remember this letter, and I memorized it. Not only did I write it, I memorized it. That was 1979. 78, 79. I turned it in, and 1989, I got a letter. This man had kept all these letters from like a decade of teaching. He had them in a box, and every year he would take the box, go to the post office, say, here you go, mail it. And he would mail it back to all the students. When the letter came in, I went, I know this letter. Because through the years, I've been practicing what I had written and memorized. Opened the letter. Lisa and I, by this time, we were married. We had one child. She was pregnant with the second one. And I took the letter and I walked into a separate room and I went, I know this letter. Yes! About 40% of it. 60% of it, I forgot I read. Forgot what I wrote. As Christians, we sometimes do the same thing. We glorify the good times, minimize the bad times, bend them over to the lesson. We read that Bible verse, all things work together for good for those that love God and are according to His purpose, and therefore there shouldn't be any bad experiences. And that's a lie. Here's what I want us to, over the next 2 weeks or so, we're going to look at Matthew chapter 10 in depth. Matthew chapter 10, Jesus called his 12 disciples. He called them to him, and he gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. Jesus calls his 12 disciples together and says, okay, guys, here's the deal. I am giving you a part of my power. Not all of it, but I'm going to give you the authority to take care of some business. 1979. no, 1997. There's a dyslexic moment, sorry. 1997 in August, I went to my first church. Upstate New York, a little town called Bath, New York. When I looked at it and we were interviewing, it was about as Norman Rockwell as you can imagine. And when we got there, we were there for 3 weeks, we realized it was Norman Rockwell as seen by Jackson Pollock. Those of you who are fans, you understand, it was a mess. But when I got there, I wasn't ordained. I was in the middle of my studies, mostly through my studies, and the district superintendent, well, actually the assistant district superintendent says, I am giving you the authority to do all the things of the church. See, without that, I couldn't give communion. Without that, I couldn't legally marry somebody. Without that, well, I could do counseling, some. But when he handed me his authority, I was actually working on his notability. Does that all make sense? Jesus is doing the same thing here. Jesus calls the disciples and says, I'm giving you this. You haven't necessarily earned it. You may not even understand it. You probably don't get the full ramification of it. But you have the authority to drive out unclean or demonic spirits. How many of you would like to have that? How many think that'd be kind of neat? Well, be able to get rid of them. I'm going to tell you, you don't want to go into that half-baked. Okay? You know what I'm saying? You don't want to go into that blindly. You don't want to go into that without having a notion of what it's about. Because it's scary. Okay? For the sake of the people in the audience, and I don't want to freak anybody out, but I will say this. Demons are not hiding under every tree, behind every tree and under every bush. Satan doesn't have that kind of manpower, but they are real. Okay? Some things are medical, some things are physical, some things are supernatural. And when you cross the supernatural, you understand it and you know that it's there. And to heal every disease and sickness. How many of you would like to have that one? But, wow. No cancer, boom, it's gone. Wow, But think about it for just a minute. Think of your responsibility to that. Okay? These are the names of the 12 apostles. How many of you know the 12 apostles, disciples?
I got a song.
52 Dab Street.
I got a song.
5 with one name, 2 with another name. 52. Yeah. Okay. Lisa knows it by song. Every Christian should know who these men are. If you don't, here's where you find them. Okay? And don't be surprised if next week I ask you, anybody now know the 12? Hint, hint. I'll have a prize for you. Okay? If you're online, send it in to me. I'll have a prize for you too. But if you do that, then not only do you have to send it in the comments, but you have to leave your address so I can send it back to you. Okay? These are the names of the 12 apostles. Simon, who's Peter, his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Everybody ought to know these men. Basic Christian knowledge.
And soon to become Paul, the 13th.
And eventually Paul. But we're only in Matthew here, okay? These 12, Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Now, he gave them power. He gave them the power to get rid of demons. He gave them the power to heal disease of every kind and every kind of sickness. I quote Spider-Man's uncle, with great reward comes great responsibility. Something like that. Jesus says, here's the rules. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter into the town of the Samaritans, the half-Gentiles. This trip, you are only to go to the lost sheep of Israel, your own kind. Don't add cultural difference. Don't add spiritual difference. Stay among your own people. As you go, say this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. The kingdom of heaven is closer than it's ever been before. Sometimes we read this passage, we forget this next verse, verse 8. Heal the sick. Okay, that's cool. Okay? The next sentence, the next bit, we forget. Raise the dead. Jesus said, greater things will you do than even I have done. And Jesus raised the dead. And he gave his disciples the ability to raise the dead. That could get a little scary, couldn't it? See, if we're talking strictly by the words, that's a scary proposition. Can you imagine? The apostles walk past the cemetery and go, hey, Bob, be healed. And everybody comes out. Boy, that some of those horror movie guys, they would love that one, wouldn't they? That's like a Tim Burton sketch. Stephen King. But I want to propose this. How many of you know Walking Dead men and Walking Dead women? How many of you know the ones that are going straight to hell and don't even know it? They're the dead also. Then he goes on, cleanse those who have leprosy. Don't even be afraid of the scourge of our generation. Leprosy isn't going to hurt you. Now, I want you to think about that. What's the scourge of our generation? You fill in the blank. Drive out demons. By the way, demons will not go if you talk to them politely. They must be driven out by the power of God. And then this part, we remember this part of the verse. Freely you have received, freely give. Now, I know some pastors, you turn that into a, you need to tithe and you need to give money to the church. It has nothing to do with that in this passage. Okay? But recognize that the power that God has given you, he didn't give it to you because you earned it. He didn't give it to you because you deserved it. He gave it to you because it was his good will and good pleasure to entrust you with it. Why would God entrust the apostles in this case with all this power? What did he want them to do? Think about it for a minute.
See things from Jesus' perspective.
See things from Jesus' perspective. I'm saying this for online, okay? Accept the challenge. We can make this into one easy sentence. He wanted them to do. How many of you have ever been given authority to do something and you didn't do it? Some people just get their hair eyeball.
You got my hair eyeball.
Here's what I want us to think about for a minute. When God gives you a gift, he doesn't give it to you to sit on in a bank account. He doesn't give it to you to sit on and say, well, I'm going to entrust it and I'm just going to sit on it till it hatches. If he gives you something freely, he wants you to use it freely. If he gives you his word, he wants you to use his word. If he gives you his strength, he wants you to use his strength. Does all that make sense? How many of you ever given somebody a gift and they never opened the package? Anybody ever had that happen? How did it make you feel? Make you feel good? Make you feel, why did I bother? Why did I bother giving a gift if they're not going to open it? My grandmother was a great lady. We went to my aunt and uncle's house for Thanksgiving, and Grandma made a pumpkin pie. Grandma did bake. That was a big deal. Grandma brought her pumpkin pie. We had dinner. It's Thanksgiving. Dessert came. I brought whipped cream. So it's pumpkin pie, I got some whipped cream, right? Yeah, you can do that, that's fine. There's no pumpkin pie. It gets to be the time Mom and Dad said, we got to go back home. My aunt and uncle said, well, we're having other guests later today. We're saving the pie for that. Grandma wasn't having any of that. Grandma turned around and said, then I'm not leaving. Grandma, you got to go. It's a 4-hour ride home. And give me the pie and let's go. See, what she was saying is, I gave the pie freely, but you're not going to use it, and I'm not going to share in the benefit of it. It's coming back. You and I have been given gifts from God. How many of you have been given different gifts from God? How many of you know what your gift is? How many of you know most of us have more than one? How many of you know you're saved? Salvation is a gift from God, right? But it's freely given to you. What are you supposed to do? Freely given. Tell people how they can get it. You're not responsible for them getting it. You're responsible for them knowing about it. See, we talked earlier before people came online, saying that as we have events at church, not everybody's going to show up. But I'm going to tell you, we're trying. We're getting better, but we're trying to send out messages when the events are coming. So that if people don't come, it's because they know about it and choose not to rather than they don't know about it. Makes sense? That's why we have a directory, so we can do that. That's why we put it on our YouTube channel. That's why we put it on our website and our Facebook. Because if I forget to mention it, look at our website, look at our Facebook page. They're there. You may have to scroll down a little bit farther than you're used to. That's there. Freely you received, so freely give it out. Now, there's a whole rest of the chapter here. I hope you come back next week for that. How's that? Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you that you didn't just give it, in this case, you give it to the disciples as a precursor, as a pre-omen, as a pre-sign of what you're going to do on Pentecost. Lord, we live post-Pentecost. We live in a world that is just as dark, a world that is just as evil, a world that needs you just as much. Help us to recognize that you've given us a magnificent tool, magnificent tools, multiple,